NC Pork. Good for the plate, great for the state.
Welcome to This Week in College Football with David Glenn, powered by NC Pork. Thank you so much for joining us again this week. I'm Chris Edwards. So happy to be back with David here in year 3 of the quickly growing North Carolina Sports Network. On our weekly show in 2025, DG and I are mostly going to look ahead at the upcoming week's college football matchup. We'll also discuss some of the sport's biggest headlines and take a quick glance back with some of DG's expert analysis on the biggest games and developments from the previous week's schedule. DG, now in his 39th year covering college football, both here in North Carolina and around the Atlantic Coast Conference. As we jump into this week's matchup, a quick reminder that the pork industry is a huge part of our North Carolina economy, with more than 42,000 jobs and an economic impact of almost $11 billion per year. You can learn more at ncpork.org. That's NC Pork. Good for the plate, great for the state. DG, great to see you again, my friend. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Chris. Happy October to you and all of our viewers and listeners. You know me well enough to know I never like saying goodbye to warm weather, the summer months, etc. So I'm in an unconventional location for our show this week, so I figured I'd have a little tropical vibe on the screen behind me as you and I have some fun talking college football today.
Maybe a little Margaritaville-esque for you today.
Look at you go. You know me very well.
Let's get into some of the biggest games involving North Carolina teams here in Week 6. Now, the big winners in Week 5 included Oregon, Ole Miss, Alabama, Virginia, Duke, and East Carolina. While at the Division II level, how about UNC Pembroke shutting out nationally ranked Valdosta State? We'll have more on last week's results a little bit later in today's show. That includes one North Carolina-based team that just this week joined the national top 25 rankings for the first time, boy, in a long time. But it's time to get to this week's biggest contest, beginning with those involving teams here in the bold North State and continuing on with 3 national matchups involving some other teams that we know very well. This segment brought to you by our great friends at Atlantic Tire and Service, where DG and his family take all of their vehicles for routine maintenance, service needs, and a world-class selection of new tires. Atlantic Tire and Service, with more than 25 years of award-winning experience serving our communities, and they have grown to 7 locations, 2 in Raleigh, 2 in Cary, 1 in Durham, 1 in Wake Forest, and 1 in Greensboro. Learn more or make an appointment today at AtlanticTireOnline.com. DG will start in Chapel Hill, where 1-3 Clemson is visiting 2-2 North Carolina. This is a noon start on Saturday. It will also be our Old North State tailgate and traveling sports circus tour stop this week. This game will be also on ESPN, and the Tigers, DG, a 13-point favorite in Kenan Stadium.
Yeah, Chris, remind me to hit you with a fun fact before we go to game number 2. I usually save the fun facts for the end of the show, but I'm going to give you one related to this Dabo Swinney-Bill Belichick matchup. Don't let me forget. But let me start here. There are 10 college football coaches making $10 million or more this season, and 2 of them, Dabo Swinney of 1-3 Clemson and Bill Belichick of 2-2 North Carolina, are, of course, going head-to-head in this game. Among the others in this financial neighborhood, by the way, the only other one who does not have a winning record right now is Deion Sanders of the 2-3 Colorado Buffaloes. The other 7 guys who are members of this exclusive big money club have either good records or great records at places like Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, Alabama, Southern Cal, and LSU. So there's a little bit of the buzz missing from what we originally thought a Belichick-Swinney matchup might bring. While both Clemson and Carolina are in crisis mode at the moment, as we discussed in significant detail on our show last week, they took very different routes to get here. The Tar Heels situation is much easier to explain because Belichick just started his tenure in Chapel Hill. And as we tried to warn everyone all summer and in the preseason, while he and his staff seem to be recruiting well for future seasons, Carolina just has below average talent at most places on its depth chart this season, at least by ACC standards. The Heels have had some very good moments on defense this season, but their truly anemic offense, and especially their dysfunctional passing game, has been really hard to watch. It is up to first-year offensive coordinator Freddie Kitchens, a Mac Brown era holdover who has a very thin resume as a coordinator and a play caller over his 27-year coaching career in the NFL and the college ranks. That to me was by far Bill Belichick's most surprising hire in Chapel Hill. It's up to Kitchens and his offensive staff to get something better out of either the starting QB Gio Lopez, the South Alabama transfer, or sixth-year senior quarterback Max Johnson, who has energized the Tar Heels at times off the bench this season. With Sweeney in his 17th full season as the head coach at Clemson, it is much harder to understand the Tigers' current predicament, especially because they returned the highest portion of last year's production, roughly 80% among the entire 136 schools that are playing at the FBS level. It is one thing to lose to LSU and Georgia Tech, which are both high in the national rankings right now, but it's another to lose at home to Syracuse and to struggle to beat Troy also in a game at Death Valley. The senior quarterback, Cade Klubnik, that we had on the David Glenn show this summer, has had a nightmarish season so far. He was projected by some to be a first-round NFL pick, hasn't looked anything like that. And Clemson is dead last in scoring offense in the entire ACC right now at less than 20 points per game. Meanwhile, three other key starters, wide receiver Antonio Williams is one, the starting left tackle Tristan Lee is another. They've missed several games with injuries, and the Tigers' defense, which is loaded with future NFL talent, has been solid, but not nearly as dominant as expected back in August. One mark of great coaches is that they make great use of an open week with all that extra practice time. So this will be a fascinating litmus test for both Bill Belichick and Dabo Sweeney and their teams, who have basically had 2 full weeks to prepare for one another, because neither the Tigers nor the Tar Heels had a game last weekend. And then I'll preempt your reminder. The fun fact is this: only once in the history of college football has there been a matchup of a head coach who's won multiple Super Bowls in his past, here, of course, Bill Belichick, versus a head coach who has won multiple national college titles previously, in this case, Dabo Sweeney. That example was more than 30 years ago. It was Bill Walsh at Stanford after winning several Super Bowls with the San Francisco 49ers. It was Joe Paterno of Penn State. He had already won a couple of national titles with the Nittany Lions by the time it was a blockbuster bowl in the early 1990s. For the record, Bill Walsh and Stanford did beat Joe Paterno and Penn State. So Carolina fans would love to see history repeat itself in that regard. But obviously, Clemson is the better team. Clemson's probably a 2-touchdown favorite. And it would be a surprise to most if the Tar Heels even make this a game on Saturday.
Let's move to game 2, DG, and it's at Lane Stadium in Blacksburg. 2-2 Wake Forest visiting 2-3 for Virginia Tech. The Hokies off that win over the Wolfpack in Raleigh last week. 1 o'clock kickoff on Saturday. This is being televised by the CW, and the Hokies opening up as a 4-point home favorite in Blacksburg.
Yeah, while there is a realistic possibility that neither of these teams will make a bowl game this season, we included this matchup because both of them showed a little improvement and a lot of fight just last week under some pretty challenging circumstances. Playing under an interim head coach, Philip Montgomery, a guy who's a former Tulsa head coach. He was elevated from offensive coordinator of the Hokies after the midseason dismissal of Tech's head coach, Brent Pry. Then the Hokies went to NC State and upset what I think is a pretty solid Wolfpack team on the Pack's home field. Meanwhile, in Winston-Salem last week, the first-year head coach of the Deacs, Jake Dickert, came oh so close to his first signature victory at Wake Forest. The Demon Deacons led number 16 Georgia Tech 20-3 in the third quarter before falling to the still undefeated Yellow Jackets 30-29 in overtime. Virginia Tech's struggling offense got a massive boost last week in the form of fifth-year senior running back Terrion Stewart. He's a Bowling Green transfer who had not played all that much in the Hokies' first four games. But against NC State, this guy's a 5'9", 222-pound human bowling ball type of runner. He was a two-time All-MAC selection prior to his arrival in Blacksburg. He forced 11 missed tackles while rushing 15 times for 174 yards at NC State. With the Wolfpack focused on slowing down the ground game of Tex QB Kyron Drones, who's a much better runner than passer, Stewart made them pay with some huge runs, including an 85-yarder right up the middle. Wake's defense faces a similar challenge to the one it faced last week when it ultimately wore down against Georgia Tech's dual threat quarterback, Haynes King. Offensively, Wake has been inconsistent for many of the same reasons Virginia Tech has been inconsistent on that side of the ball. Much like Kyron Drones, the Wake QB Robbie Ashford is a much better athlete, much better runner than he is a polished downfield passer, and most defenses do a good job of preparing for that. Although Ashford did find room to run for 82 yards on 10 carries against Georgia Tech. Wake's best player is the senior running back, Damon Claiborne. He posted 100-yard rushing games against both Western Carolina and last week against Georgia Tech, although NC State earlier this year held him to only 35 yards on 12 carries. If both defenses can slow down the other team's running game, it's going to become a guessing game as to which side can make more plays in their extremely inconsistent passing games. That's why this one's so hard to predict. Wake's top targets in that regard include the redshirt freshman wide receiver Chris Barnes, who's also a big-time threat in the return game. And interestingly enough, Tech's top receiver may be the sixth-year senior wideout Donovan Green, who's from Mount Airy High School here in North Carolina, and who also spent the last 5 years where? In Wake Forest, or at Wake Forest, in Winston-Salem, playing for the Demon Deacons. So after 5 years of wearing a Wake uniform, Donovan Green will be suited up for the Hokies this time on Saturday.
All right, a little ACC after dark for you in Game 3, DG. The 3-2 Duke Blue Devils making the trip out west at 4-1 Cal. 10:30 start Eastern time on Saturday night on ESPN. The Blue Devils, after making that 6-hour flight, traveling over 2,000 miles, they're a 2-point favorite in Berkeley.
Yeah, you're a super dad. I picture you and your wife having no routine sleeping patterns because of the little ones. So you can just kind of glance over at the TV screen as Duke and Cal go at it, 10:30 and well past midnight, obviously. This is going to be a fun late night TV matchup, I think, in part because the Duke quarterback, Darian Mensah, the Tulane transfer, in my opinion, has already proven himself to be among the best quarterbacks in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Whereas the Cal quarterback, and I knew you'd leave this to me, Jaren Songo, I'm going to try it one more time. Jaren Songo Polotele, he's a highly touted true freshman from Hawaii who originally signed with Oregon, and the Ducks have a pretty good eye for quarterbacks. This guy is widely viewed as a rising star, even though as a true freshman, understandably, he's gone through some growing pains so far this season. Even if you give the quarterback advantage to the Blue Devils in this game, as I do, it is important to remember that Cal's defense has played pretty well during the Bears' impressive 4-1 start. Whereas Duke's defense has been very up and down this year, although last week it was truly brilliant in the Blue Devils' 38-3 win at Syracuse. More on that a little bit later in today's show during our fun facts and shoutouts. Cal coach Justin Wilcox is a modern-day rarity in that he's been with the Bears for 9 seasons now, and yet he has never led them to a winning record in conference play, either in the Pac-12 or the ACC. Now, he has taken them to 4 bowl games in his first 8 years, but he has not posted a winning overall record since 2019, which is an eternity these days in college football. At most Power 4 schools, that sort of resume definitely would put you on the hot seat, and it did not help when, during this past offseason, listen to this, starting quarterback at Cal, Fernando Mendoza, transferred to Indiana. The starting running back, Jaden Ott, transferred to Oklahoma. The backup running back, Javian Thomas, transferred to UCLA. The starting tight end, and a really good one, Jack Endries, transferred to Texas. The starting wide receiver, Nizaiah Hunter, left for Nebraska. And there were other departures in the transfer portal as well. That mass exodus was one of the reasons the Bears opted in the offseason to hire a general manager for football. In their case, the former Carolina Panthers head coach, Ron Rivera, who actually played linebacker for Cal way back in the early 1980s. If our viewers and listeners get a chance, check out my one-on-one interview with Coach Rivera right here on our North Carolina Sports Network YouTube channel. While Cal has really struggled to run the ball and has been inconsistent offensively even during a 4-1 start, the Bears have developed a pretty strong culture on defense under Justin Wilcox, and that theme definitely has continued so far this season. In fact, most people would be surprised how many defensive players the Cal program now has in the NFL. They have some great current players too. The Bears rank second in the ACC right now in scoring defense, behind only Miami at around 18 points per game. And as usual, they have a bunch of talented players, especially at linebacker and in the secondary. Duke's 2 losses this season, remember, came against the 2 best defenses the Blue Devils have faced, those of Illinois and Tulane. So this will be a true test for Darian Mensah and his various weapons, which include the Harvard transfer Cooper Barkate at wide receiver and a true freshman running back, Nate Shepard, who may be one of the ACC's rising young stars and may get a shout out later in today's program.
All right, DG, as we wrap up this opening segment, is there a game involving at least one North Carolina-based team that you think is worth perhaps a brief mention this week, and why?
Yeah, NC State, Appalachian State, and Charlotte are also in action at the FBS level this week. And while none of those games qualifies as a high-profile matchup, the 1-3 49ers will get a Friday night national TV spotlight on ESPN2 during their trip as a massive underdog to 3-1 South Florida. Meanwhile, 2-2 App State is only a slight favorite over 0-5 Oregon State at the Rock in Boone. So it'll be interesting to see if Dow Loggins and company can get back on the winning track with the Mountaineers. Finally, at NC State, the 3-2 Wolfpack will host an FCS opponent in 1-4 Campbell. But much bigger things are in play off the field. And I do want to mention all of us here at the North Carolina Sports Network send our deepest condolences to the Wolfpack's defensive coordinator, DJ Elliott, and his family and friends. Coach Elliott lost his teenage daughter, Drew, this week after her 5-year battle against a form of pediatric cancer. I mentioned, Chris, you're a dad. I'm a father myself. I just cannot imagine experiencing the death of one of my own children. As Coach Dave Doeren put it at his press conference this week, parents are not supposed to be at the funerals of their own children. Coach Elliott apparently has decided to rejoin the Wolfpack for this week's game against Campbell, although Charlton Warren, a guy our Mike Waddell interviewed earlier this season, he's going to call the defensive signals against Campbell since Coach Elliott, understandably, was away from the team for much of the week. He was dealing with his daughter's death. There was a memorial service. Again, our condolences to that entire branch of the Wolfpack's extended family. Some things, obviously, are much bigger than football. Michael Berard, Managing Director Investments with the Founders Group at Stifel, works with a select group of high net worth individuals and institutions to develop and implement investment plans tailored to their specific objectives and risk tolerances. If you are interested in highly personalized, well-researched guidance and outstanding personal service, you can contact Michael at 984-364-2002. That's 984-364-2002. Stifel Nicholas and Company Incorporated, member SIPC and NYSE.
Welcome back to This Week in College Football, presented by NC Pork. Okay, DG, let's dive right into our ACC and National Week 6 look ahead. It's brought to you by our friends at XL Moving and Storage, a family-owned Allied Van Lines partner here in North Carolina, With more than 25 years of award-winning experience, local, long distance, or commercial, they do it all. Learn more and get a free quote at excelms.com. That's XL Moving and Storage. This week, our national spotlight is on three conference games in the ACC and the SEC. Among the six teams involved in these matchups, DG, five of them are ranked in the national top 25, and the other still undefeated through its first four games of the season. So let's begin with a Saturday afternoon game in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Number 24, Virginia. The Cavaliers 4-1. They're at 4-0 Louisville. This is a 3:30 kickoff Saturday afternoon in the Derby City, televised on ESPN2. And the Cardinals, a home favorite by about 6 points.
Yeah, Chris, one thing to remember about Virginia as this season continues, especially if the Cavaliers, already ranked, figure out a way to beat Louisville on Saturday afternoon, is that the Cavs' loss at NC State was a non-conference game. I know that sounds strange because State and UVA have played so many ACC contests against each other in all sorts of sports. But this year, that matchup was added by the schools. It was not assigned to them by the conference office. They opted to play each other as a non-conference game. So the Wahoos are actually a perfect 2-0 in conference play, despite that loss to the Wolfpack, with a dominant win over lowly Stanford and then last week's stunning upset of number 8 Florida State in Charlottesville. Prior to that victory, by the way, UVA's all-time record against Associated Press top 10 opponents had been 6 wins, 56 losses, and 1 tie. So yes, that definitely qualifies as a special victory for the Wahoos. Now, the Cavs do not have either Miami or Georgia Tech on their schedule this season, so their most challenging game after they face Louisville may be their trip to Duke in mid-November. Seriously. Nobody would think of Virginia in the ACC title game, and I still don't, for the record, but the Cavs have put themselves in a fascinating position here. Virginia is a clear-cut underdog in this game, in part because Louisville is 4-0, and the Cardinals are on the cusp of a top 25 national ranking themselves, in part because they will be at home, and in part because the Cavaliers just aren't consistently reliable on defense, even as they've been fantastic offensively. The Cards obviously hope to exploit that UVA defense, and they have fantastic skill players in running back Isaac Brown and wide receiver Chris Bell, among others. But the Cards are not a sure thing offensively right now because their quarterback, Southern Cal transfer Miller Moss, has been just okay so far. The Louisville head coach, Jeff Brom, remember, is a former Cardinals quarterback himself. And since returning to his alma mater as the head coach, he has done amazing things with his previous transfer quarterbacks. It was Jack Plummer in 2023, Tyler Shuck in 2024. Shuck was a middling seventh-year senior when he arrived at Louisville last year, and Brom helped turn him into a second-round NFL draft pick, a guy who's now one play away from starting for the New Orleans Saints in the NFL. Maybe Miller Moss will be able to find his groove against UVA. Maybe not. Jeff Brom is that QB whisperer. Maybe it's a matter of time, or maybe the Cards just aren't as good at quarterback this season. We'll see. Louisville likely will need a very effective offense against UVA because while the Cardinals have played very good defense this season, nobody has figured out a way to stop UVA's quarterback, Chandler Morris. The guy's a transfer from North Texas. He's an absolute blast to watch. He's a legitimate dual threat who throws much better than, say, a Haynes King of Georgia Tech or a Tommy Castellanos of Florida State. But Morris also runs much better than a guy like Carson Beck at Miami, C.J. Bailey at NC State, or even Darian Mensah at Duke. All of the guys I just mentioned are very effective quarterbacks in their own ways with varied styles. But to this point, Chandler Morris has been the best dual threat, almost equally dangerous as a runner and thrower, and is even an emotional leader on top of that. Morris has plenty of help as well. NC Central transfer Jamari Taylor at running back, guys like Trell Harris and Cam Ross at wide receiver. Louisville may have an advantage in the trenches in this game, and the Cardinals may need to lean on that to deflate a Virginia squad that is feeling really, really good about itself right now.
All right, DG, let's move on to the Southeastern Conference and a game that maybe nobody thought was going to be a matchup of ranked teams. Number 16, Vanderbilt. The Commodores are 5-0, and they visit 10th ranked Alabama. The Crimson Tide 3-1. This is in that ABC 3:30 window on Saturday. Alabama, a 10-point home favorite in Tuscaloosa.
Why did we include this Southeastern Conference game, even though Alabama over Vanderbilt in football has been one of the most predictable results in any major conference over like the last half century or more? Well, first, both teams are ranked in the national top 25 right now, as Chris said, and there are only a handful of ranked versus ranked games on the entire Week 6 schedule. Second, the Commodores are off to that 5-0 start for just the second time in the past 80 years. And this year's track record does include a dominant 31-7 win at South Carolina. Third, Vandy's star quarterback, Diego Pavia, is both one of the team's best players as a seventh-year senior and a college sports trailblazer, a guy whose lawsuit against the NCAA enabled him and many other former junior college products to extend their major college level eligibility. Fourth, ESPN's popular college game day program is on hand in Tuscaloosa, so that's got to count for something. Fifth, Vandy has one of the top ranked offenses in the entire country. And that adds another layer of intrigue because historically, the Tide has absolutely dominated the Commodores with their defense, and that is not going to be nearly as easy this time. Finally, just last year, to refresh everybody's memories, when 4-0 and number one ranked Alabama visited a 2-2 Vanderbilt team in Nashville in early October a year ago, the Commodores did post one of the most shocking upsets in SEC football history. Now, as Chris said, this game is in Tuscaloosa this year. The Crimson Tide are a double-digit favorite, as usual. For perspective, keep in mind that Vandy just went 40 years, 4-0, between wins over Alabama. The Commodores beat the Tide on the field in 1984, and they beat them on the field in 2024. In between, the only victories, and I'll use air quotes for this, the only victories in that 40-year interim in Vanderbilt's column came when Alabama had to either forfeit or vacate several wins over the Commodores because of whatever NCAA rules the Crimson Tide was caught violating at the time. This has been a lopsided rivalry, to say the least, and this Alabama squad has bounced back impressively from its season-opening loss at Florida State, especially with the Tide's 24-21 win at number 5 Georgia just last week. While Alabama once again appears to be one of the SEC's top contenders, as usual, everyone agrees that Vanderbilt's offense is very dangerous. Some metrics say that Diego Pavia is leading the number one offense in all of college football. But regardless of the metric, everybody puts this Vandy attack somewhere in the top 10 nationally. The Commodores are fourth in the FBS ranks in scoring offense at nearly 50 points per game, although South Carolina is the only above average team that they have faced so far this season. Could this be just another very predictable business as usual triumph for the Crimson Tide? Yes, it could be. But all of these various details and variables taken together make this matchup much more compelling than most of the times these two schools get together on the gridiron.
Why they play the games, DG.
Amen.
Let's go to game number 3. You mentioned Florida State a few minutes ago. The Seminoles ranked number 18 in the AP poll this week after that Friday night loss at Virginia last week. FSU is 3-1 on the season. They are hosting undefeated and third-ranked Miami Saturday night in Tallahassee, 7:30 on ABC. No real surprise, Miami a favorite. The Hurricanes a 4-point road favorites in Tallahassee.
I wonder how many of our viewers and listeners remember what I'm about to say. You do, I know. Soon after Miami joined the Atlantic Coast Conference in 2004, just 3 years at that point, after the most recent of the Hurricanes' 5 national championships in football. There was a popular school of thought that the Canes and Florida State, which back then was still a national power and already a 2-time national champion under the legendary coach Bobby Bowden, that those two schools may end up playing each other every year in the ACC championship game, which remember was first played during the 2005 season. So 20 years ago. 20 years later, the Knowles Canes matchup has still never happened in the ACC title game. And the Hurricanes have played in that postseason contest only one time. It was in 2017, and they got their doors blown off and annihilated basically by Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers. Well, with both Miami and Florida State now back in the national rankings, there is a decent chance that this will be the year finally for a Miami FSU matchup in Charlotte with the ACC title on the line. But first, these teams, of course, are going head to head in Tallahassee on Saturday night. The number 18 Seminoles are coming off their disappointing 46-38 double overtime defeat at Virginia, but they are still number one nationally in scoring offense at 53 points per game, and they certainly are infinitely more dangerous than they were last season now that they have dual threat quarterback Tommy Castellanos running the show and plenty of weapons around him. The Noles also have won 3 of the last 4 games in this rivalry against Miami, and they will be playing at Doak Campbell Stadium this time, where they've won 5 of their last 7 against the Hurricanes. Miami, meanwhile, has been playing the best football of the 4-year Mario Cristobal era, especially on the defensive side of the ball. The Canes lead the ACC and rank in the top 10 nationally in scoring defense at only 11 points per game. So this will be a classic strength versus strength collision whenever Florida State has the ball. On the flip side, there are some fair questions about both Miami's offense, which has struggled to throw the ball downfield against the better opponents, and Florida State's defense, which was exposed at times in that loss at UVA. The winner of this one probably will be whoever controls the trenches, where Miami has looked a little bit better than Florida State so far. But as you know, big plays and turnovers always matter. And Castellanos' legs and his special connection with the 6'6", 223-pound wide receiver Deuce Robinson, a Southern Cal transfer, is probably going to provide that Miami defense with by far its biggest test of the season.
Field goal kicking going to be big in this game too, DG, if history tells you anything.
Amen. Wide right, my friend.
Exactly right. We'll have more of This Week in College Football with David Glenn coming up in just a moment here on the North Carolina Sports Network.
Need insurance? Go to a team that's got your back. The Lawson Insurance Group, run by the Lawson brothers, right here in Raleigh. They deliver real service, smart protection, and the kind of trust that's hard to find these days. Find them online by searching Lawson Insurance Group. That's Lawson, Lawson Insurance Group, and tell them DG sent you.
Welcome back to This Week in College Football with David Glenn, presented by our friends at NC Pork. Time for our coaches and quarterback segment, which is brought to you by NC by Train. Skip the traffic, kick back, and enjoy the ride with NC by Train. Whether you're heading to see family, catching a game, or just exploring the bold North State, Amtrak service makes travel easy and affordable. Book your next ride today at ncbytrain.org and see North Carolina the relaxing way. DG, we're going to stick with the coaches topic this week. 7 days ago, you circled UNC's Bill Belichick and Clemson's Dabo Swinney as the 2 ACC head coaches who were in severe crisis mode, as you called it. Now, although you were careful to specify that neither coach's job is in danger here in 2025. Now, that's something college football teams are approaching their midway point of the season, beyond the situations at schools like Stanford and Virginia Tech, where we know coaching searches are very much underway. Are there any additional programs in the Atlantic Coast Conference or in North Carolina where you think a coaching change for 2026 might be in the cards?
Chris, have you ever heard my theory about how college football coaches are like circus performers?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe you'll like revisiting that topic and others might enjoy it for the first time. And to be clear, as I start, it is definitely too early to know for sure. Every team we follow still has at least half of its regular season schedule in front of it. But there are two other ACC head football coaches who have come to personify that old story about how most college coaches, in the high profile sports especially, end up living the life of a circus performer. That is, it's really hard to spend a long time in the same place without the spectators getting tired of your act, even if it's a pretty good act overall. Those two coaches right now are Dave Doeren, who is in his 13th season at NC State, and Pat Narduzzi, who is in his 11th season at Pitt. And I'll explain why here in a minute. If you're literally running a circus, you can manage this human instinct in one of two ways. Option one, you move around a lot. Option two, you stay in the same place, but the spectators, your audience, sort of naturally turns over on a regular basis. Think about option one. When P.T. Barnum and James Anthony Bailey, Barnum and Bailey, created the greatest show on earth more than 100 years ago, what did they do? They made it a traveling circus, an event that moved from city to city, from town to town, from venue to venue. People would get tired of seeing the same things over and over on a weekly or even monthly basis, but if you move around enough, a sense of anticipation builds, and then the spectators tend to appreciate the show, even if it was very similar to what they saw the last time, because the last time was probably so long ago. If the circus tried to stay in the same place with the same audience, it just wouldn't have a chance of working out well in the long run. Option two only works in places like Las Vegas, where, for example, Cirque du Soleil. Did you know that phrase, translated from French, means circus of the sun? It's my second language. That's been a fixture for more than 30 years in Las Vegas. Now, your show's details and execution can and do change somewhat over time, but the reason the entire enterprise works under the same name in the same place for such a long time in that example, even if the basic formula remains the same, is that the audience turns over on a regular basis. You're not entertaining the same group of people week after week, month after month, year after year, and that's a big part of what makes these approaches to the circus work so well. Well, getting back to college football, both NC State coach Dave Doeren and Pitt coach Pat Narduzzi fit the following description. They have done good things, but not elite things for more than a decade while at the same school. And now both sides, meaning the coach and a big chunk of that school's fan base, are getting a little bit tired of each other on a pretty regular basis. You can see it at times in the coaches' press conferences when they make critical references toward many in their own fan base, as Dave Doeren did again just this week. And you certainly can see it on social media and message boards where Doeren and Narduzzi have become subjects of abuse on a very regular basis at this point. When a coach is a true train wreck, these situations just resolve themselves very simply. The coach gets fired. But Doeren has more wins than any coach in NC State football history, and Narduzzi has the second most wins in Pitt football history. When it comes to consistency, Dave Doeren has had the Wolfpack Bowl eligible for 10 of the last 11 years. Narduzzi has had the Panthers Bowl eligible for 7 of the past 10 years. When it comes to recent success, Doeren went 9-4 and finished with a top 25 national ranking just 2 years ago in 2023. And Narduzzi had back-to-back top 25 seasons in 2021 and 2022, including that 11-3 campaign and the ACC football title in 2021. Remember, Pitt is the only school not named Clemson or Florida State that has won an ACC football title since 2010. That's 15 years ago. And Narduzzi was the guy who got that done. Those sorts of accomplishments tend to matter to school administrators, even if many fans forget or discard them much more easily. Right now, NC State is 3-2, but the Wolfpack has lost back-to-back games to Duke and Virginia Tech. As Coach Doeren said this week, it's a what have you done for me lately world. The Wolfpack fan base has always deserved a lot of credit for being passionate and for showing up in large numbers, home and away, even as a huge chunk of that fan base has not always been all that rational or realistic or fair, whether toward the media or toward their own coaches. What is definitely fair, though, is for any of them to ask why Manny Diaz has a better team in his second year at Duke than Dave Doeren has in his 13th year at NC State. It's also fair to ask how the Wolfpack loses at home to a 1-3 Virginia Tech team that got its head coach fired earlier this season and that got annihilated at home by Old Dominion just a couple weeks ago. Similarly, Pitt is 2-2, but the Panthers have lost back-to-back games, in their case to West Virginia and Louisville, and in their case, they lost their final 6 games of the 2024 season too. 2 weeks ago, against a rebuilding West Virginia squad in what they call the backyard brawl, Pitt had a 24-14 lead midway through the fourth quarter, but lost the game in overtime. Last week, the Panthers led Louisville 27-17 at halftime in a home game, but they blew that lead too, getting outscored 17-0 in the second half and losing 34-27. As with Dave Doeren, those are the sorts of details behind disappointing defeats that often get the fans in an uproar. Just as NC State fans can be a blend of the lunatic fringe, but also others who are asking very fair, very reasonable questions, so can Pitt fans. The bottom line with both Doeren and Narduzzi, who both still have a lot of difficult games ahead this season, they actually also face each other on October 25th at Pitt, so they can compare horror stories during their pregame handshake if they're in the mood, is that they personally are going to be fine no matter what happens. Even though neither coach, by the way, has either the university president or the athletic director who hired them still in those same positions, which is always a precarious situation for a coach or anyone else in the employment world. Why will these coaches be fine no matter what happens? Well, because both guys have made tens of millions of dollars over the last decade plus. Both are in their mid to late 50s. They have enough money to last a lifetime, and they both have significant buyouts in place were they to get fired or step away in the coming years. Doran's contract runs all the way through the 2029 season. Narduzzi's contract runs all the way through 2030. It wouldn't surprise me if either or both don't last to the end of their contracts, whether that is them choosing to step away or them getting fired at some point. But those are the two guys right now that we're watching closely. And we'll revisit, of course, the status of those coaches and probably others a little bit later this season here on the North Carolina Sports Network. Looking for real deal local flavor in Wilmington? Head to the Original Saltworks restaurant, run by Bob Hubbard and serving up Southern staples since the 1970s. Hot grits, buttery biscuits, juicy burgers and dogs. It's fast, it's fresh, and it's full of bold North State pride. Open for breakfast and lunch 7 days a week, always starting at 7 a.m. It's the Original Saltworks on Oleander Drive in Wilmington.
Welcome back to This Week in College Football, presented by NC Pork. All right, DJs, we're wrapping up the show today. We like to offer some quick mentions about those making positive headlines on the gridiron, especially in the ACC or here across North Carolina as a whole. So with that thought in mind, we bring you our weekly fun facts and shout outs brought to you by our good friends at Jimmy's Bar and King Neptune Restaurant in Wrightsville Beach. Jimmy's has a full bar, nightly drink specials, and live music 365 days a year. And right next door, King Neptune has become one of the best restaurants in the entire greater Wilmington area. You can keep up with Jimmy's on Facebook and Instagram at Jimmy's Wrightsville Beach and learn more about King Neptune Restaurant at neptuneswb.com. All right, DJ, time for you to bring it on. What do you have left for us in your college football notebook this week?
I will have shout outs involving NC State and Duke and East Carolina and others, but as always, I will start with a fun fact. There is a Division II program. Valdosta State had gone 34 years, that is since 1991, and through 395 consecutive football games without being shut out. The Blazers of Valdosta State are a 4-time Division II national champion, most recently, by the way, in 2018 under Coach Kerwin Bell, who's now the head coach at Western Carolina in the FCS ranks, and a guy who has visited us on the David Glenn Show. So anyway, why would we bring up an out-of-state Division II program in our Fun Facts segment? Well, last Saturday, under their third-year head coach Mark Hall and their third-year defensive coordinator Colin Neely, UNC Pembroke, that Chris mentioned to start today's show, went to Valdosta State and blanked the nationally ranked Blazers 31-0 on their home field, ending that 34-year no shutout streak. Coach Hall, who previously served as a successful head coach at Chowan University, another D2 program right here in North Carolina, is now well on his way to his fifth straight winning season in his 5 years as a head coach. Meanwhile, the journey of Coach Neely, the Braves' standout defensive coordinator who helped that magic happen last Saturday, he provides us with a fun fact within this fun fact. During his playing days, Neely was a star defensive end in the Big Ten at Michigan State, where he competed under a decorated defensive coordinator named Pat Narduzzi, who, of course, is now the head coach of the Pitt Panthers in the ACC. UNC Pembroke, which did not even field a football program until 2007, entered the D2 rankings this week for the first time this season. The 4-1 Braves are number 24 or number 25, depending on the poll, and they would love to make a run at their program's best ever season, which came in 2016 when they finished 10-2 and number 13 in the final coaches poll of that campaign. At this moment, UNCP is the only one of our 32 in-state NCAA football programs that is nationally ranked. And at this point, the Braves are favored to win their league, which is called the Conference Carolinas. If they pull that off, they will earn that league's automatic bid to the Division II football playoffs, which this year is growing to a 32-team bracket.
When their service is over, our veterans may have a new career and life to manage. We're here to help, providing more than $1 million a year in career-building scholarship funds and discounts on every haircut for veterans. Sport Clips Haircuts, supporting veterans everywhere.
Now for some quick shout-outs. Shout out to NC State running back Hollywood Smothers. If you go by Hollywood, it is not easy to live up to your nickname. But Smothers is doing exactly that here during his redshirt sophomore campaign with the Wolfpack. Entering October, Smothers was averaging 114 rushing yards per game with 570 yards on an ACC best 96 carries. That comes out to about 6 yards per carry, which is an outstanding number, especially in the middle or latter part of a season. His 114 rushing yards per game are sixth nationally, third among Power 4 players, and head and shoulders above every other guy in the ACC. By the way, just as we celebrate homegrown college stars here in the North Carolina Sports Network, we also celebrate those who may have started their college career somewhere else, only to return to the bold North State. Smothers is a perfect example of that. He was a 4-star prospect at West Charlotte High School. He originally signed with the Oklahoma Sooners, but he transferred to NC State prior to the 2024 season after redshirting his single season at OU. Smothers was an effective backup for the Wolfpack last year, and as a starter this season, he is putting up some all-ACC type numbers so far. Shout out to Duke running back Nate Shepard, a true freshman from near New Orleans. He has emerged at midseason as one of the most promising newcomers in the entire Atlantic Coast Conference. Shepard is about 5'10" and 200 pounds, enrolled at Duke in January of this year. So when you have the benefit of going through spring practice, he opened the season third or fourth on the Duke depth chart at running back. But with each passing week, it has become more clear that he is the Devils' most electrifying player at that position, even as a true freshman. After carrying the ball only a handful of times in Duke's first 2 games, he had 75 yards on just 5 carries in his homecoming game of sorts when Duke visited Tulane right there in New Orleans. That eye-opening performance led to additional playing time, as you might guess. Then Shepard had 14 carries for 61 yards in Duke's win over NC State, and he followed that up with his collegiate breakout game last week, 15 carries, 168 yards, and 2 touchdowns in the Blue Devils' 38-3 annihilation of Syracuse. Shepard's performance against the Orange led to both the ACC's Running Back of the Week and Rookie of the Week honors just a couple days ago. Shout out to East Carolina head coach Blake Harrell, the team's former defensive coordinator, remember, and his brand new defensive coordinator, Josh Aldridge, and the entire Pirates defense after their 28-6 victory last Thursday night over Army. The Black Knights run a variation of the triple option offense, and it's an absolute headache to prepare for simply because it's so different than most of what college defenses face on a week-to-week basis. About 11 months ago, up in West Point, Army possessed the ball for it was actually more than 37 minutes against the Pirates and dominated them on the scoreboard too during what became a 45-28 victory for the Knights. This time in Greenville, ECU limited Army to only 12 first downs and less than 300 total yards in what was an impressive 28-6 win for the Pirates at Dowdy-Ficklin Stadium. The defensive stars included sixth-year senior safety Teagan Wilk, fifth-year senior linebacker Raheem Craig, and sophomore safety Jamarly Riddle. So far this season, ECU leads the American Conference in scoring defense at only 13 points per game. Shout out to Duke head coach Manny Diaz, another defensive guy, and his second-year defensive coordinator, Jonathan Patke, and the entire Blue Devils defense after their 38-3 shellacking of Syracuse in the Dome in upstate New York last Saturday. That game was so lopsided that it matched the Orange's worst home loss since they joined the ACC in 2013. As we discussed on last week's show, the Orange were coming off that huge win at Clemson, but they had lost their big arm, gunslinging quarterback, Notre Dame transfer Steve Angeli, to a torn Achilles in that game. Syracuse's backup QB, an LSU transfer named Ricky Collins, is a completely different type of athlete, someone likely to use a completely different part of the playbook, and he hadn't played much at either LSU or Syracuse, so that lack of video to study probably complicated the Blue Devils' game preparation on defense last week. Nevertheless, Diaz and Patke, who have known each other for more than a decade and worked together previously at Mississippi State and at Miami, where remember Manny Diaz was the head coach for a while, they put together another wonderful game plan, and the Blue Devils executed it to near perfection, forcing 3 turnovers and limiting the Orange to only 314 yards and a single field goal. Duke has not been great overall on defense this season, but that win at Syracuse was an enormous step in the right direction on that side of the ball. Last but not least, shout out to East Carolina's backup holder, 5'8", 150-pound Kyler Pearson, for his huge special teams play in the Pirates' 28-6 victory over Army in last Thursday's ESPN game. Pearson is a sixth-year senior who has played almost exclusively on special teams during his entire college career, and ECU is his 4th university after previous stops at Kansas, Tennessee Martin, and Oklahoma State. In Greenville, he's a graduate student walk-on, which is not something you see very often, but he earned his way onto the team's depth chart as the Pirates' #1 punt returner. He is also the backup holder, and with ECU nursing a 21-6 lead over Army in the 4th quarter, the Pirates inserted him into the lineup as they lined up for a field goal, but of course they faked it. Pearson took what looked like a purposely high snap that brought him out of his crouch. He darted as a little guy that you probably couldn't even see behind those massive linemen, darted through a beautifully created hole on the right side of the line, and then scooted, and I mean with some speed, check it out on YouTube, past a diving safety's tackle attempt for a 32-yard touchdown that clinched the ECU win over the Black Knights in front of the home fans. After 5.5 years of college football, Pearson scored his very first touchdown, and he did it during his team's victory and on national television, no less. Well done, Kyler Pearson. Well done, ECU. I am David Glenn, and those are my fun facts and shout-outs. as we head into college football's Week 6 right here on the North Carolina Sports Network.
Thanks, DG, and thank you to NC Port for being the founding partner of the North Carolina Sports Network. A quick reminder, DG and his staff are posting daily articles at our fast-growing website, ncsportsnetwork.com, which also has direct links on its homepage to this YouTube channel, which now ranks in the top 2% in the world with almost 40,000 subscribers. It also has the wide variety of places you can get on-demand audio and podcasts of this show and the David Glenn Show, along with all of our other offerings. And third, updates on year 3 of our Old North State Tailgate and Traveling Sports Circus, which already in the fall of 2025 has been to Carter Finley Stadium in Raleigh, Clemson's Death Valley, Keenan Stadium in Chapel Hill, Wallace Wade Stadium in Durham, a Legacy Stadium in Winston-Salem, and to the home venues of both North Carolina A&T and Guilford College in Greensboro. So what about this week? It's back to Chapel Hill on Saturday morning and the hours leading up to the noon kickoff between Clemson and North Carolina at Keenan Stadium. For DG, I'm Chris Edwards. Thank you so much for joining us on This Week in College Football with David Glenn, right here on the North Carolina Sports Network.
This has been Bold North State Football Daily, an exclusive presentation of the North Carolina Sports Network. Make sure you follow us on social media at the NC Sports Net, and check out our website that is wall-to-wall coverage of North Carolina sports at ncsportsnetwork.com. Our foundational partner is the North Carolina Port Council, raising the bacon, raising the bar. Telling the stories of the bold North State, this is the North Carolina Sports Network.